My name's Lucas Taylor. I'm 27 and grew up in Denver, Colorado. I've always loved the outdoors, the kind of person who feels more at home on a trail than in a crowded city. My best friend, Josh, and I have been hiking together since we were teenagers. He's more adventurous than me, always pushing for the riskier trails, the harder climbs. But that weekend hike in the Rockies, it was the last time I'll ever trust someone I don't know. We picked a remote trail we'd never tried before. It was barely marked, winding through dense forests and steep terrain. Josh had read about it online, said it was a hidden gem, no crowds, just pure wilderness. It sounded perfect. We packed our gear and planned to hike deep into the forest, camp overnight, and head back the next morning. The first half of the day was amazing. The air was crisp, the views were incredible, and the only sounds were our boots crunching the dirt and the occasional bird call. By early afternoon, we were deep in the woods, far from the trailhead. That's when we saw him. A man was walking toward us, his pack slung over one shoulder. He looked about 40, wiry but strong, with a scruffy beard and eyes that seemed to watch everything. He introduced himself as Carl and immediately struck up a conversation. He asked where we were heading and how long we'd been hiking. His tone was friendly, too friendly, almost pushy. Josh, being the social one, started chatting with him. I stayed quiet. Something about Carl didn't sit right with me. He had this strange energy, like he was sizing us up. Then he said he knew the area well and mentioned a shortcut that would take us to a beautiful, hidden clearing perfect for camping. Josh lit up at the idea, but I hesitated. Something about following a stranger into the woods felt wrong. I don't know, man. We don't need a shortcut, I said, trying to sound casual. Carl just smiled. Suit yourself, but I've been hiking these trails for years. I'm just trying to help. Josh gave me a look, the kind that said, come on, don't be paranoid. Against my better judgment, I gave in. I told myself I was overthinking things. The shortcut was barely a trail at all, just a narrow path through the trees. Carl led the way, Josh right behind him, and me bringing up the rear. As we walked, I noticed Carl doing something odd. Every so often, he'd reach into his pocket and drop a small rock on the ground. At first, I thought it was nothing, but he kept doing it. Every 50 feet or so, a tiny rock would land in the dirt. Why are you dropping those? I finally asked. Carl glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. Just keeping track of where we've been, he said, his tone light. It didn't feel light. It felt calculated. I glanced at Josh, but he just shrugged like it was no big deal. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. The forest grew darker, and the path started to feel more like a maze. I checked my phone. No signal. When I asked Carl how much farther, he just laughed. Patience, he said, his voice colder now. By the time it was pitch black, I realized we were lost. Carl, I said, trying to keep calm, this doesn't feel right. Where's this clearing? He stopped and turned to face me, his eyes glinting in the dim light of Josh's headlamp. You're right, he said, his voice unnervingly calm. We're lost. Josh laughed nervously, thinking Carl was joking, but I knew he wasn't. What the hell, man? I snapped. Why would you bring us out here if you didn't know the way? Carl's smile faded, replaced by a look that sent chills down my spine. Not everyone survives out here, he said quietly. The words hit like a punch. Josh froze, finally realizing how serious this was. Before either of us could say anything else, Carl turned and started walking into the darkness, as if he didn't have a care in the world. Josh, I whispered, we need to go. Now. We didn't wait. We ran. We didn't know where we were going, only that we had to get away from Carl. The forest was a nightmare in the dark. Branches clawed at our faces, the ground uneven beneath our feet. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made me jump, thinking Carl was behind us. After hours of stumbling through the woods, we finally saw it, the faint outline of the marked trail. Relief flooded over me as we ran toward it. We followed it back to the trailhead, not stopping until we were in Josh's car, speeding away. Carl was never found. Weeks later, I saw a news story about hikers disappearing on that same trail. The only thing authorities found: a line of small rocks leading into the woods. I haven't been hiking since. The mountains don't feel like freedom anymore. They feel like a trap. I'm Jake Miller, and this is the story that changed my life forever. I'm 34 now, but when this happened, I was 30. Back then, I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, just a short drive from the Smoky Mountains. I was an outdoorsy guy, always looking for my next adventure. I loved hiking, and so did my girlfriend at the time, Vanessa. She was 28, full of life, and loved the outdoors as much as I did. That day started like any other hike, but it ended in a way I'll never forget. Vanessa and I decided to hike a trail we hadn't done before, deep in the Smoky Mountains. It wasn't a particularly challenging trail, but it was secluded, which we liked. We packed light, water, snacks, and our phones. I carried a small first aid kit and a map just in case. We planned to spend the day on the trail, enjoy the views, and head back before sunset. The first few hours were perfect. The air was crisp, and the forest was alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Vanessa was a little quieter than usual, but I didn't think much of it. She said she felt like we were being watched, but I brushed it off, teasing her about watching too many scary movies. She laughed, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. We reached a beautiful overlook around midday. The view was breathtaking, rolling mountains stretching as far as the eye could see. We took a break there, snapping a few pictures and sharing a granola bar. Vanessa seemed to relax a bit, and we decided to keep going, aiming to loop back around in a couple of hours. That's when things started to feel off. About an hour later, I noticed Vanessa had fallen behind. At first, I thought she was just taking her time, maybe snapping more pictures. I called her name, expecting to hear her voice or see her pop out from behind a tree. But there was nothing, just silence. I walked back down the trail, calling her name louder this time. Still no response. My stomach started to twist into knots. Vanessa wasn't the type to wander off without saying something. As I retraced my steps, I found her water bottle lying in the dirt. A little further down, her backpack was there too, slashed open. The sight stopped me cold. Panic started creeping in. I yelled her name over and over, my voice echoing through the trees. I called 911, explaining what had happened as clearly as I could while my heart pounded like a drum. They said they'd send help, and I was told to stay put and wait for the search team. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Rangers and volunteers showed up, combing the area with flashlights and dogs. They asked me dozens of questions: where I last saw her, what she was wearing, if she seemed upset or acted strangely. I told them everything, replaying the day in my head like a broken record. Night fell, and the woods felt suffocating. The search party kept going, and I stuck close to the Rangers, hoping every second that they'd call out saying they'd found her. Just before midnight, one of the Rangers came back, holding something in his hand. It was Vanessa's phone. They found it near a cliffside about half a mile from the trail. The Ranger said there was a video on it, and he thought I should see it. My hand shook as I unlocked the phone and pressed play. The video was dark, the image shaky. Vanessa's face came into view for a moment, her eyes wide with fear. She was whispering, her voice trembling. "Jake, I think someone's watching us," she said. The camera panned around, showing nothing but trees and shadows. Then, a loud crack, like a branch snapping. The screen went black. I dropped the phone. I couldn't process what I'd just seen. Someone, out there, watching us. The search continued through the night, and by morning, I was numb with exhaustion and dread. It wasn't until 2 days later that they found her. Vanessa's body was at the base of the cliff, far from where we'd last been together. The police said it looked like she had fallen, but they also suspected foul play. Her injuries didn't fully match a simple accident. They investigated for weeks, questioning everyone who'd been in the area, but they never found any leads. Whoever, or whatever, was out there that day got away. I moved out of Knoxville not long after. I couldn't stay. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her whisper, felt the crushing weight of guilt. I replayed it over and over in my mind. What if I hadn't walked ahead? What if I had believed her when she said she felt watched? Would she still be alive? I'll never go back to the Smoky Mountains. Some nights, I lie awake, wondering who, or what, was watching us that day, and why they chose Vanessa instead of me. My name is Hannah Lee, and I'm 25 years old. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and hiking used to be my escape. But after what happened last year on a quiet ridge trail, I haven't set foot on a trail since. That day left me shaken, and no matter how much time passes, I can't stop replaying it in my head. It was late September, perfect hiking weather, cool, sunny, and peaceful. I decided to try a remote trail I'd never been on before. It wasn't as crowded as the popular ones, which I liked. I started mid-morning, passing a couple of hikers early on, but after that, I was alone. At first, the solitude felt refreshing. Just me and the sounds of the forest. Then, about halfway up the trail, I noticed a backpack sitting just off the path. It was worn but intact, as if someone had set it there intentionally. I stopped, looking around. "Hello, is this anyone's bag?" I called out, but no one answered. The silence felt strange, but my curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer and unzipped the main compartment. Inside, I found a wallet, some granola bars, and a jacket. I opened the wallet and saw a driver's license belonging to a man named Brian Keller, who looked to be in his mid-30s. Then I noticed the jacket. It was stained. At first, I thought it was mud, but as I looked closer, I realized it was blood. My heart started racing. I dropped the jacket back into the bag and stepped away. The woods suddenly felt heavier, quieter. I decided not to touch anything else and walked quickly up the trail, trying to shake the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the sense that someone was watching me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following me, but there was no one. The silence was deafening. I finally decided to turn back, telling myself I was overreacting. When I got back to where the backpack had been, it was gone. I froze, scanning the area. My pulse thundered in my ears. The bag had been right there just minutes ago. I called out again, louder this time. "Hello, is someone here?" My voice cracked, and the forest swallowed the sound. No response. I didn't wait to find out what was going on. I ran. My pack bounced on my shoulders, and every step felt like someone was right behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the trailhead and burst into the ranger station, out of breath and panicked. I told them everything. The bag, the wallet, the bloody jacket, and how it vanished. The ranger listened carefully, his expression turning serious. "What was the name on the ID?" he asked. "Brian Keller," I said. His face changed. He grabbed a folder and flipped through some papers. "Brian Keller was reported missing a week ago," he said. "His family said he'd gone hiking on this trail, but never came back." My stomach dropped. I sat there, frozen, as the ranger called for a search team. They combed the trail for hours while I waited, still shaken. Finally, they found him, near the summit, hidden in a shallow ditch covered with branches. He'd been dead for days, maybe since the day he disappeared. The police believed foul play was involved, but they didn't know who or why. They couldn't explain the bloody jacket in the backpack or how the bag disappeared when I turned back. What haunts me the most is the thought that someone was out there with me that day watching me. Maybe they had been waiting for the perfect moment, or maybe they just wanted to scare me. I'll never know. But I do know this: whoever they are, they're still out there. And I'm never going hiking again.